Jeanne d'Arc, the story of a hero rising from the flames of courage and faith. France, 1412. The Hundred Years' War had cast a shadow over the entire nation, leaving the people in a starless darkness. England's growing power on French soil had left the population feeling helpless. The French kingdom, torn apart by civil wars and occupied territories, was marked by defeat rather than victory. Once proud, the French people now awaited a savior. But that savior was not in the royal family's palace or among the French aristocracy. Her name was Jeanne d'Arc, and she was born as an unknown girl in a small village. Jeanne was born in 1412 in the village of Domremy, the daughter of a farming family. Her childhood passed quietly on the war-torn lands of France, but there was something extraordinary about her. Jeanne would look up at the sky each night, feeling a restless urge in her heart, as if something deep within was calling her. Her faith in God was strong, and as she prayed, her emotions intensified, feeling as though something was about to awaken her at any moment. One day, she began to hear the voice of God. This voice would soon lead her out of her small village and onto a great journey to save the people of France. By the time she was just 13, Jeanne believed that God had given her a mission to liberate France from its occupied territories, unite its people, and bring victory to the French kingdom. God's voices instructed her to support King Charles II and to help him. Determined to fulfill this divine duty, Jeanne left behind the life she knew. But the villagers didn't believe her. The idea of a woman taking on such a mission was seen as pure madness in a time when women were expected only to stay at home. Yet Jeanne held on to her faith despite every obstacle. One day, she gathered her courage and set off to reach King Charles II of France. The journey was filled with hardships, but each obstacle only strengthened the resolve within her. Guided by God's mission, Jeanne moved towards the king, with a vision of a world where the French people would be free. Along the way, she would gather soldiers who saw her as a leader and were willing to follow her. Those who questioned how a young peasant girl could lead the French army were left without answers. Jeanne heard only God's voice, which always showed her the right path. When Jeanne finally arrived in Tours, she stood before King Charles II and introduced herself as a savior sent by God. At first, the king regarded this young girl as little more than a madwoman. Yet, in a moment steeped in darkness, he saw her as a beacon of hope. The king made a bold decision, granting Jeanne the authority to lead the French army. A young girl, a peasant, now stood at the helm of his forces. This decision was daring, but the people began to embrace Jeanne's leadership. Something had changed. The French had finally found a hero. Jeanne's first great test came in 1429 during the Siege of Orleans. The French army was trapped, facing a dire impasse under the weight of the English siege. The city was surrounded, and surrender seemed inevitable. But in these hopeless times, a courageous leader emerged. Jeanne resolved to march fearlessly and with unwavering faith toward the besieged city. She was just a peasant girl, but in her heart burned an unshakable belief that she had been chosen by God to fight for the freedom of the French people. Her journey symbolized the strength, courage, and determination of a woman destined to shape history. Jeanne entered the besieged Orleans with remarkable bravery and achieved what once seemed impossible. She successfully liberated the city, bringing renewed hope to the French army. This monumental victory ignited a wave of joy and celebration across the entire nation. Jeanne was no longer just a peasant girl. She had become the hope of the French people, a symbol of courage and freedom. Her heroism spread quickly among the populace, and her name began to be spoken with increasing admiration and respect. She was not only the harbinger of victory, but also the embodiment of a nation's revival and a source of inspiration for the French. However, behind this victory, Jeanne's rapid rise deeply unsettled many circles, and her ascent became not only a morale boost for the French army, but also a threat to the peace of French society and the ruling classes. Her sudden success became a significant threat, especially to the church and the aristocracy. In a traditionally male-dominated world, the rise of a woman to such a high military and religious position shook the social structure of the time, and this unease fostered a hidden resentment. The source of Jeanne's power was even more frightening in the eyes of everyone. It was not rooted in her personal talents or societal ambition, but in a divine mission given directly to her by God. For the ruling classes around her, this meant a woman chosen by God was surpassing them, delivering a message that threatened the established order. Many who couldn't accept this began to plot ways to influence, bring down, or divert Jeanne from her path. Dark emotions like betrayal, envy, and lust for power trailed her every step, preparing the disaster that would eventually befall her. Many adversaries sought to undermine her mission and faith, isolating, defaming, and ultimately weakening her. This laid the groundwork for the real danger behind her victories and the inevitable downfall that awaited her. Jeanne's fate changed a year later, in 1430. Amid the chaos of France's internal wars, she was captured by the Burgundians and handed over to the English. When Jeanne was brought to trial, the church accused her of heresy and witchcraft. Those judging her found it dangerous that this young woman, who claimed to hear God's voice, was powerful enough to be respected among the people. The court used every form of torture to force Jeanne to deny God's messages, but she never wavered in her faith. She believed unwaveringly that she was chosen by God. In 1431, at the tender age of just 19, Jeanne d'Arc faced the harshest decision of her life. Fate had granted her only a brief life, yet this short life would leave a deep mark on the course of history. After months of imprisonment, betrayed and condemned, she signed her own death sentence and was led to the stake in the square at Rouen. In that final moment, in front of the people, she bravely and unshakably showed her loyalty to God one last time. Her eyes opened one final time in the name of the freedom of her people and her nation, and her spirit, along with her defiance, would live on forever. After Jeanne's death, her name became a symbol of French resistance and national unity. Her heroism, courage, and faith inspired a nation to rise again and claim its rightful place on the stage of history. The love and respect the French people held for her only grew after her passing. Jeanne's name began to be revered as that of a hero and a saint. This transformation after her death turned into a legend that influenced not only the French, but the entire world. Jeanne became a lasting emblem of the strength of a woman and the determination of someone walking in the path of God. Her legacy of resistance and heroism left an eternal mark not just for the French, but for all humanity. In time, France began to secure victory after victory against the English, each one honoring Jeanne d'Arc's sacrifice and heroism, boosting the morale of the French people. Although her death initially seemed like a loss, it became a pivotal moment that reinforced the unity of the French people. Her courage and deep faith in God continued to inspire the French, who embraced her legacy as they would that of a saint. Jeanne's death strengthened their resilience, providing hope even in the darkest hours of the war. The French felt her spirit beside them in every victory, rallying together and drawing on Jeanne's legacy as one of the strongest motivations behind their triumphs over the English. Jeanne's sacrifice ignited a wave of faith and determination among the people, a wave that ultimately carried the French to the brink of victory. She displayed not only the leadership of a woman, but the highest example of faith and bravery. After her death, her name continued to be honored. In 1920, Jeanne d'Arc was declared a saint by the Catholic Church. She became a symbol of resistance not only for the French people, but for the entire world. Jeanne d'Arc's life is a legend, showing how the courage, faith, and determination of a single woman can change everything. Her stand against the flames left an unforgettable legacy for her people and for all of humanity. She was a peasant girl, but her spirit was vast enough to change a nation. Jeanne d'Arc immortalized her name throughout history, becoming not only the hero of the French, but of the world.